All members of the council are present, so let's call to order the September 28th meeting of the West Sacramento City Council Successor Agency and Financing Authority. Today is a special meeting that's being called also pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order N-29-20, pursuant to which the council and staff are meeting via teleconference. To reduce the spread of COVID-19, members of the public have been asked to watch the meeting via live stream on our website or via Wave Cable Channel 20, and to submit comments in writing prior to the meeting. So we have just the one item because it is a special, the two items because it is a special meeting today. But let's begin first with presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda. Madam Clerk, do we have any comments on matters not on the agenda?
Good afternoon, Mayor. We did not receive any comments.
All right, thank you very much. Then let's proceed to item 2, which is consideration of the COVID-19 Small Business Assistance Program. And so if we can turn over to Ms. Richards. And Ms. Richards, just as we get started, we have received public comments on this item, and they're posted on the city's website, along with all other comments that have been made. And there are particular questions in those comments I'm hoping you'll be able to address in the staff in your presentation, particularly with respect to outreach, and then to item 7 of the recommendation, which relates to those small businesses that have not received or been notified of assistance from the state, county, or federal government, or from the city. So if you wouldn't mind addressing that as you make the presentation, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I'm here tonight to provide information and request consideration of a small business assistance grant program. As you know, many of our businesses, especially the small businesses, have been significantly impacted by COVID and the resulting closures and capacity limits on their businesses. And in developing the recommendations, we worked very closely. I was appointed to a task force for Yolo County that helped develop their grant program. And I learned a lot through that process, and I've also consulted with other cities about the good things that worked and things that maybe didn't work so well. So we've crafted this draft program, and we're seeking your input tonight on both the criteria, the eligible businesses, as well as any additional criteria or uses that you would like to incorporate in this program. One thing I would like to call out right away is that the eligible businesses that we have listed here include restaurants, eating and drinking establishments, and personal care services, instructional services, general retail, and indoor recreation. We had originally included childcare in that list, and at the time when I prepared the staff report, we had heard that that Yolo County was in the process of approving some additional CARES Act funding for childcare. And so I removed that item thinking that childcare facilities in West Sacramento would be able to benefit from that program. But I've learned just recently that that is primarily for recipients of childcare, so families that would be eligible. And so I'm actually going to recommend that we include childcare, both in-home childcare as well as childcare centers, as eligible businesses in this program. So that is one change that I'd like to make a comment on. And then the second one regarding the criteria, my original intent was to exclude those that had received Yolo County grants, as well as other CARES grant funds. That could be Yolo County's restaurant program, the Great Plates program. My intention was not to exclude those that have received PPP, Paycheck Protection Program, or SBA loans, but I did not include that footnote in the criteria. So that is also a correction. We don't want to exclude businesses that have received those loans. As you know, many businesses in West Sacramento did receive those, and they're in the process of either requesting forgiveness for their PPP loan, but that's going to be a long process, and we don't want to exclude those businesses. In terms of outreach, we definitely will have the materials translated into several languages, similar to Yolo County, and those would include, of course, Spanish, Russian, and perhaps some additional Asian languages. We've begun outreach for the county's program, but we do want to make sure that we reach businesses that don't normally perhaps go to chamber meetings or maybe have not been to the power hours and the many things that we've been doing. So Elijah Ortega in my office and myself, we've actually been honing and refining our business contact lists, and we're actually calling businesses about the county program now. So we're in the process of improving our lists and our phone lists, our email lists. I think that other outreach could include neighborhood groups, particularly the Broderick, the BB-Can neighborhood, and particularly the northern area neighborhoods where they tend to be not as plugged in perhaps to other business networks. And I'm also happy to take suggestions or recommendations from council members about that. I did go to the commission on September 23rd and brief them on the program. I wasn't able to provide the full report. We received good input from the Commission, Economic Development Commission. They also encouraged us to consider childcare as an eligible business. And they had questions about the types of businesses and whether independent contractors would be eligible, particularly those that work for, say, a beauty salon, but they maybe rent a chair. And so the clarifying criteria on that is that businesses that have a business license are those that will be eligible. So if you're renting a chair from a business that has a business license, the business itself would be eligible. If you'd like, I can go into a little bit more description of the eligible business categories that I identified. I don't know if many of you can automatically think of, what does it mean to be an instructional service? What does it mean to be general retail? If there are no questions about that, I can skip over that.
All right, yeah, let's proceed.
Okay. So going into the criteria, again, sort of learning from other jurisdictions and also the county's program, we wanted to make sure that the businesses that were most impacted by either a closure, an indoor closure, or capacity limits were able to receive assistance. And we also were trying to reach businesses that perhaps had not received any other funding. So we do have an exclusion in there for the Yolo County grant program. We also included, excuse me, sorry, I'm on the wrong page. We also included a limit on the gross annual revenue. We're trying to exclude larger businesses. We want to exclude quick serve, national chains, your Burger Kings, your In-N-Outs. This is not for them. And so we have both a employee limitation of 25 full-time employees, as well as a $3 million in annual gross revenue for 2019. So those are the key criteria of how we're trying to narrow the small businesses that would be eligible for the program. In terms of eligible uses, we want to make sure that businesses that can take their business outside but maybe don't have the funds or the resources to do that, that they can use these funds to expand outdoors, buy equipment, furnishings, fixtures, train staff, have signage, and that would be both public and private areas. But we're also identifying that because of the extent of equipment that's required to go into a public right-of-way, we want to make sure that we are able to provide either barricades or stanchions or signage, barriers that prevent the outdoor area where patrons may be from the vehicular areas. And so that's a big lift for a lot of small businesses to try to navigate that, even though we had created a special process and we assisted as many as we could. Many businesses have done that in their private parking lots and in their private areas, but we've had only a few inquire about public areas. And then they sort of were turned off by the process and the amount of equipment that they would need to have in order to go into a public area. So we've done a little bit of outreach already, and we've consulted with our capital projects and transportation department about where that might work in the city. And we have a few areas in mind, but we don't have a formal recommendation in terms of where we would do that yet. But we are setting aside and asking you to set aside $25,000 for the purchase of equipment and furnishings that could be used in a public right-of-way or street or parking area that is not being used at this time. In terms of the eligible businesses, we have a very limited amount of money, as you see here. We originally proposed this program to serve only restaurants because that's what we were hearing, that restaurants, above all, were really struggling. And I don't have to tell you, you all live in the city, you've gone to the restaurants, you know what they're going through. So we proposed that the $90,000 of the $150 be allocated to restaurants and eating and drinking establishments. Eating and drinking establishments includes wineries and breweries, your bars, some of our local neighborhood bars in the North area in particular. I think Roco would be included in that, just to give you an example. And then in category 2, we're proposing $60,000 of the grant funds be earmarked for general personal services, instructional services, your martial arts, your vocal, your fitness, and general retail, and then indoor sports and recreation. And again, we would recommend that we include childcare, and that will expand considerably the list of businesses that are eligible. But I think our recommendation is to include a larger business pool so that everyone has an opportunity to apply and be considered. Moving on, the grant fund uses mostly for outdoor operation, expanding their outdoor service area, but also we want to leave it flexible enough for those that don't need to expand but maybe have been really saddled with a lot of sanitation and cleaning expenses, PPE, other expenses, and including rent and other things, payroll, supplier payments that they've had while they have not been able to earn any money and make sales. So those are the primary eligible uses. And again, requesting $25,000 of this $175 be used for encouraging and facilitating outdoor expansions in the public rights of way. That concludes my remarks, and I am available for questions and comments. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Diane. I also want to note that the website is experiencing some technical difficulties with a server error, and just to confirm that our IT staff is aware of it, and they are working on it diligently right now in order to make sure that the agenda copies and the other documents are available on the site. So we'll continue to proceed, but we are aware that that is a problem, and hope that they will be able to resolve it as quickly as possible. I just want to, this item has been, this issue has been taken up by the council subcommittee that's been providing guidance on the COVID-19 emergency since that subcommittee was created, but actually all the way from the beginning of the pandemic, as we, I think in week 3, when we began to look at efforts that were underway in other cities around the country and the region, and at that time, particularly in the rest of the world, around providing alternatives for businesses to be able to do business in communities around cities. And so we've been making this together for quite a while, recognizing that West Sacramento, like all other cities other than the 25 largest cities in America, including the city of Sacramento, hasn't had any discretionary resources to expend for these purposes. And the regulatory environment with respect to some of the health orders has been, I think as everyone's more than well aware enough of, has been constantly changing. And so it's, with the partial reopenings in May and June, followed by the reclosings, I think that there were a lot of local businesses and others that thought they could hold on under those changes, but the rules have been in flux ever since. We have an opportunity now, a small one, as a result of the allocations that have been trickling down to us. So whereas the city of Sacramento's had over $80 million, here we have a couple $100,000 on a per capita basis. It's the difference between West Sacramento and Sacramento is enormous, and that's true around the country, just because of the way that the Congress has refused yet to fund cities that aren't the largest cities in America. So we have a small trickle of funds in order to expend, and so that this effort is intended to try to provide support so that businesses can stay in business. And I want to focus in that space because this is one of the key policy questions before us is these sort of twin pressures to want to spread, $175,000 to as many businesses as possible, versus helping to make sure that those businesses that have the possibility to possibly, to stay open, if they could just, get out onto the sidewalk or do other things, if they had, some support, and that support's probably more than $1,000. That trade-off is an essential one that is before us. Around how we set those priorities. And I want to say, for me at least, it's very important that those businesses in our community that have a path forward, that just need our help in order to stay open and stay thriving, that we make sure that that's a priority, and that we don't try to, we're not the federal government. This is not PPP2 that we're doing here. The city doesn't have $175,000 doesn't go very far. So the worst thing that we can do is promise $175,000 to everyone and give them nothing in terms of their ability to actually make their business work. And so Diane's described some of those situations where that's where we could make a difference potentially. But I think it's going to be really important that we stay focused in that space. At the same time, I think the context that businesses are facing in our community is constantly changing. About the health orders, determine who can and who cannot stay in business under what terms, and other programs that emerge, and businesses that are like figuring it out. Like every day, we all know these. We all know companies, big and small in our community, that are just trying to make it from week to week, just like everyone else. So I think I think some humility about the program is also in order. So I would like to be careful about getting too much in the weeds of, okay, it's going to be $16.50 for nail salons and $8 for pet care, as though we know. Like we don't actually know all of that. Like where are there opportunities? Who has a moment to move? So setting some general targets and some guidelines, but that for me should be principally about where can we actually make a difference, is important, without trying to pretend that this is a Soviet system where we are going to be able to determine exactly who needs and who gets what. It's just I don't think that's an appropriate. What we would have allocated a month ago might be very different from what we would allocate today, and what that will be next week could change yet even more. So I think setting some targets, setting some high-level priorities and goals in this program is really important, but also making sure that both we, the city manager on our behalf, and small businesses that get a great idea, or they get some other kind of partnership or what have you, that they're able to move, and so are we in that process, and take advantage of those real opportunities. Because so far, our local businesses in West Sacramento have, it is so heartwarming to see how much people have like brought that West Sac creativity and grit. Small businesses who are undefeated, trying to make sure that they get through this, and they've come up with so many creative ideas. And I know they have also been, especially the retail ones, have been so grateful to residents of our community who've also stepped up and ate out, or at least ordered for delivery more often. They've gone and provided support. They've made donations. They've shopped local. They've done all the things that because they know, like we do, that our community isn't just the roads and the signs and the ballpark and the bridges. It is fundamentally these small businesses that define us as our character, and that for the most part, the small businesses are our people too. And they are residents. They're the sponsors of Little League, and they're the ones that when a group of high school students are going to get the chance to go to the Rocket Launch Center at Cape Canaveral, that it's their business that says, yeah, sure, we'll throw in $1,000 to help pay for the truck. Right? That's what makes it a small town worth living in, and something special. So our small businesses have definitely stepped up. Our people have and are continuing to step up. And although our resources are incredibly limited in this environment, this $175,000 deployed smartly can make a difference for those businesses that are on the cusp of being able to make it just a little bit longer in order to make it through the pandemic. So I want to thank staff for their work on this. Thank Mayor Pro Tem Sandin, who's been on the subcommittee working hard on this over the last several months. And I know I see Councilmember Orozco's posts and her pictures like every 5 seconds at some other small business in town. I know she's supporting. Everybody is doing that on the council and in city government. And then Councilmember Ledesma, who's designed virtually all of our council level policies on small business support as one of the America's leading experts in small business investment and supports as well. So we have a good team of people who've been working really hard on this to support those that support our community and support those dreams. Thanks again to the Chamber of Commerce. West Sacramento Chamber has been extraordinary in these efforts as well. So I'm looking forward to supporting moving forward with this. Fundamentally, though, we really need the HEROES Act to be approved by the U.S. Senate and by the President. What the House of Representatives have proposed would allow us and small businesses directly to be able to have the real support that they need. Far beyond $175,000, but the real, the consequences of what those small businesses have been grappling with in our town since March have been hundreds of times more than $175,000, and the aid and the support that we need from the federal government has to keep up with that. And so I know we're all going to keep pressing for enactment of the HEROES Act as soon as possible. All right, Councilmember Roscoe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with the mayor's initial comments about being very careful about how broad we allow this to be. And I see the eligibility criteria, and it says had less than $3 million in gross annual business revenue. And I'm like, for crying out loud, that is a pretty significant amount. I mean, some of these folks, these are the folks that Mayor Cabaldon referenced a few years back in his State of the City, the folks that go out on a limb because they want to just invest in a life of business ownership. And it's a small place like Doña Chollita or Ay Jalisco on the corner, or someone who wants to open up a martial arts gym for youth in our city. And this is their livelihood, but it's also made a significant impact on the complexion of our city. And so, of course, I mean, it never even occurred to me that chain businesses or whatnot would be in the running for this. But I had envisioned that it would be those folks that were having significant challenges operating just because their operations had to normally occur indoors. And I'm thinking like Carol's or the restaurants or gyms, where now, because they can't congregate indoors, they have to move everything outside. And I don't know that that's similarly situated because than some like in-home daycares, for example. Not to say that I disagree with resources necessarily, because I think it's a very important type of business as well. But if the business can't operate indoors and they're paying for the space, and have to now relocate in order to kind of stay afloat, and they have to do so outside. I mean, the additional expenses of the awnings and or the tents and the tables and chairs or all the other investments they have to make in order to make that happen. Those can be pretty significant. So that's how I saw this initially. I wonder if there could be like priority points for the certain businesses for that do fit the description the mayor mentioned. Those that eating and drinking establishments or service or gyms that have to that are essentially going to go underwater if they can't keep their operations going. I mean, this isn't a significant amount of money. And I read in two different places, and Diane, correct me, I saw either 5 or 10,000, and then I also saw 3,000. Is it all of, how are we going to divvy out these grants?
The way I structured the program initially is that since it's such a limited amount of money, that each businesses that was eligible and met the criteria would be eligible for a flat $3,000 each. And the other point is that it makes it a little easier to administrate than if we start doing points and then we start trying to divvy up the money even in a finer way than that. But I am interested in your input.
Okay. Well, I guess it says West Sacramento businesses can now apply for grants of 5 or 10,000 based on the number of employees. That's federal. I just saw it in the agenda report, the 5 and 10. So I just got a little confused. But so it's 3,000.
Oh yes, and it's the county program that they can apply for up to $5,000 if they have expenses, COVID expenses, and they have up to 10 employees. If they have more than 10 employees, up to 25, it's $500 per full-time equivalent position. So they could get a maximum of $10,000 if they had 25 employees and they had eligible expenses.
Yeah. It's thank you. And thank you for bringing this to us. Yeah, ultimately, my impression is that there should be some type of priority for those businesses who have significant barriers to opening or staying open, rather, because they have unusable real estate that can't be incorporated into their business. I mean, that's obviously expenses that they're paying for, and in order to keep going, they have to move on outside. And I'm not sure if most of our in-home daycares are only operating outside, or if they'd fit the similar criteria. Yeah, I'm trying to find that information as we're here today. But as far as at least some of the ones that I've heard of, they are operating indoors as they had traditionally, just with fewer students and with other precautions. So that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And just to be clear, so this is not a workshop. We're not providing feedback back to staff. We are adopting an actual approach and policy today. So appreciate those initial comments. And Councilmember Ledesma, you're up next.
Thank you. And thanks, Diane, and to our subcommittee for the work on this. And I swear I'm going to try not to be the banker in the room today, but there's a little bit of that here. And I said from the beginning when we addressed this crisis, and we all have felt the need to help our small business neighbors and those who we go to all the time, and we know in our city how to help them. And I get there's a lot of need for that right now. But I said at the beginning that the part that as a city we need to be conscious of, because of the reasons you outlined, Mr. Mayor, around we just don't have enough. We didn't have any money up until this point, discretionary money to give. But whatever we do have needs to be strategic, and it needs to fit into sort of where really is the need. And this kind of fits it. This isn't a large amount. So how it is fitting into the scope of what our city needs, what our businesses need, outside of which is the big program we all talk about, which is PPP or other programs that may have taken advantage of. This fills a gap, and from my perspective, of that last bit of dollars to help. PPP was really geared at payroll and employee expenses. And we know that businesses need more capital than that. And we know that the longer this drags on, the harder it is to keep revenue at levels to maintain your expenses. It's increasingly getting more difficult and more difficult, and it's siphoning capital out of their businesses and liquidity they need to serve. So having a little bit of, of liquidity injecting that into that through this grant system is a really good thing, right? And I applaud it, and more so the need to what you've outlined is as allowable uses, and probably targeting those businesses that have been hit the hardest. So I appreciate the kind of the work, Diane, you've done to sort of target this right at that core audience that we know. We visit them. We know they're having a hard time finding maybe tents or outdoor tables or finding the space, and for the restaurants and for other businesses, how do they, where are they going to get the capital? We all know most really small businesses fund their businesses through credit cards or fund businesses from relatives. And that's just the nature of it. So having a grant program where they probably already expended some of that to maybe get some relief back is an important thing. And but there are some, I have some questions around, and I get that this is not a workshop, that we want to implement this, and but there are some policy areas, Mary, you touched on that we just need to be conscious of. And it goes a little bit in what's in the process. And the one thing I have learned very clearly is the program needs to be very clear and as prescriptive as possible in communicating. So I just wanted to give you an example. So when we talk about eligibility criteria, and I'm going to go back to what's in there, but we want to be clear in their application process, and I think we kind of you kind of outline it, but that they need to provide receipts of those expenses, that they need to verify how we're going to verify when you're going through eligibility their full-time employment as of the 25th. So it's those kind of things that I'm sure you'll care for in implementation to make sure that that business owners up front are really aware of kind of how to access these funds. I think we do have a policy question around to that eligibility, the businesses that are eligible, and we do need to be conscious because it is an issue that even PPP bear in mind which is around businesses that are going to, how do you invest in businesses or continue to provide businesses that maybe are no longer available, I think, or no longer open. And I think that's an area where you probably need to put in some clarity in the eligibility. So it is the sad reality that some businesses may be open or trying to be open, but maybe they file for a bankruptcy already or some other sort of area that we want to be mindful of as we go through this process as well. So again, I know we have the employed 25 employees as of the 15th. But again, I think part of what we need to do is, are they pursuing to be in business? And I think that's an important criteria. If this helps them get out of it, we certainly want to stand behind that. The other part that I'll lost my notes here. Hold just a second. Which is how are we going to? Again, this has to do with the criteria. Is how are we going to verify the size of the business? Because I can go down a rabbit hole on that, but I won't. But I think it's important that, for instance, as we have less than $3 million in gross annual business revenue in the calendar year 2019, which is fine. But I think it's for the subject operating business because they might be an affiliate. So you get into all those kind of rules. We just need to be very mindful of that. And again, it's something that we want to think about. If it's one thing to have a business apply, and they're one business among 10 that the business that the owner owns. So we want to be very clear about who that business is, and that they're not getting this cash to pay for maybe another business and their uses. So it's that type of clarity we need to make sure I think we intend that if it's a business, a standalone business operating in West Sacramento at that location, that it has to fund that location and any expenses for that location. If it's so I'm thinking of frankly franchises where you have an owner of multiple franchises. If it's just a subway, that it's going to go towards that subject subway on West Capitol or whatever it is. And we just need to make sure it's very clear the intent of that. The one question I was going to ask and I appreciate you saying that if they have they're not excluded if they have a PPP or other type of SBA loan. I think that would be great because you couldn't pay for some of this using PPP as of the rules when they ended, whenever in June or in July, or the multiple times they changed rules on that program. The part we may want to carve out, and I would ask for kind of consult with Diane after the fact is to pay down I applaud paying down debt as an eligible use of commercial mortgage or whatever, but to pay down an actual PPP loan or other SBA loan with another CARES Act money is something we want to maybe not promote. And I say that because the program is experiencing, as you may be reading, fraud, and there's a lot of fraud areas in this in the SBA, or at least fraud protection or protections going in to protect the taxpayer money from fraud. So I want to be careful of that. And again, I don't have an answer for that, but I'm kind of flagging it, using CARES money to pay off another CARES Act loan. And again, I'm happy to talk with you about that offline, but it may be something we want to carve out as well. But paying for rent and paying for their mortgage is, to me, something I support. I think that's all the initial. If there's some way, I think the mayor you're getting at, how do we? There's not a whole lot of dollars going out, so I want to make sure we get these to the businesses that need it, or the business that are pursuing to move forward that may not have the resources to do it. So again, I'm open to suggestions there, and I just want to make sure the process is very clear and as upfront as possible as it goes out, so businesses are very clear on the rules going through it. So those are my only comments for now. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ledesma. Councilmember Guerrero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Diane, want to say thank you so much for putting this together. This is extremely helpful to the business community. One of the things I've been hearing as far as feedback is for them to receive our support, for us to step out of the way and let them get whatever they need to get done to do what they're doing, is to have their small business in place and be very successful. And I just want to do whatever we can so that we can provide them with that support, whether it be, as what this proposal includes, is providing them with the guidance to have, outdoor dining and the resources so they can, do that, or an outdoor business. One of the things I have been doing over the course since COVID started has been promoting restaurants for takeout, and continue to do so. I think it's extremely important for people to know that we have our restaurants still open, so that to the extent that they continue to shop local, that's very important for them. And I've noticed business owners are very appreciative, so that West Sac Chamber promotion has been very instrumental in getting businesses to get more frequent people to purchase meals or to purchase items from the stores. And on some of the recommendations I see here, in referencing what Councilmember Ledesma, I do want to check on the double dipping of the coronavirus relief funding. If there is a way to check with the League of Cities for guidance, I think that would be wise on our part, so that they don't offset, any kind of loans, payment for loans that they received through this, if it's all coronavirus relief. And if you have any recommendations for any other funding source that we have to help them offset the loan payment, if that's something that, as far as feedback, that they can give back to us if they need that type of assistance, so that we can take a look at these funding sources. In addressing one item, I noticed early on there were requests for relief from utility payments. And I don't know how long some businesses had difficulty making the utility payment. They were businesses that were doing very well, and I see that as an exclusion from participating if they are not up to date in the utility bill payment. And so if there's a way to identify those businesses and see if they need the additional support in seeing how we can help them, I'm a little worried that that's going to exclude a lot of businesses if they needed that kind of support, especially in the early, 2 or 3 months, when some shut down and didn't know how long the closure was going to be. And then when they reopened, I'm not sure how they were able to get the revenue to quickly get back up and, pay back the utility bills that we helped, as far as, try to prevent sending payments or, any kind of further notices for a little bit until, we got stable. One other recommendation I have on purchasing of equipment like patio furniture or shade structures, if they can shop local, we have a lot of businesses that sell that. And so whatever we can do to encourage that, to ask business owners to purchase those items from anybody here in West Sacramento that sells that. That way the money stays in the city among our own businesses. And also, I don't know, you mentioned the outreach effort. I know that I did go to Arteaga's when we had PPE distribution and they were unaware of an email that was sent, I think, to all the businesses that had a license as I checked in with them, and I provided some PPE from the Sacramento area. And so if there's a way to touch base with some businesses who may not have responded back from that first round and see if you can maybe do a telephone call and just let them know. I know there's not a whole lot of money, but if there is some that can help some small businesses that may not be able to have access to emails or whatever from the first time around that didn't respond, if there's another soft touch we can make so that it is equitably distributed citywide. Thank you, Dan.
Mayor Pro Tem Cindy.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Richards, for working on this and other folks who have been putting their thinking caps on to get this, something like this forward. Even though we have it's very modest amount of funds, there's some time pressure to make the distribution that's come with these funds, so that it does need these students to get out the door. And so I think that the way in which you've designed it's designed for our consideration is something you're trying to be elegant and as simple as possible and get the most kind of bang for the buck. And I think the proxy that perhaps the mayor's mentioned in terms of making sure that we're supporting businesses that will be able to continue, which is, I think that's what we're trying to get at. I think one of the proxies for that is businesses that are in good standing and are current with utility bills, don't have liens, unpaid taxes, that they're in a situation that this funding can actually help them through this and get out of this, that will continue to benefit the citizens by having the diversity of small businesses here. So I think I want to commend you on trying to be as elegant and with data that the city could have and be able to tap. I did have some concerns with item 7, which is, I don't know how we'll be able to actually confirm that a business that's applying has not received other funding. I'm not sure how we may be able to do that. It looks like every other piece is something that the city staff team or the chamber may have access to those data. And the other question I had was actually about the review and approval process. So if you're a small business and you have a need, and there's a lot of need right now, as we're well aware, it looks like the staff team would do a review, and it looks like we're anticipating being oversubscribed. So where we have a certain amount of funding to give out, there probably will be 2 or 3 times. It looks like that's what we're anticipating. And we have to be ready for any circumstance. And then it looks like there's a random selection of those who meet the criteria, kind of like how we do the fire work stands. And I think that the mayor's comments about making sure that we're putting the small amount of funding to the best use and helping the businesses that are, we know there's struggle all across the city, but that we're actually taking our resources and doing the most with them. I don't know that I have another approach, but I just want to hear about the thinking that went behind that suggestion or that piece in the plan, if I may.
Yes, thank you. I must give Yolo County credit, first of all, because I learned a lot being on their task force, and many of these ideas came through their very thorough review of their proposed program. We will have to request verification. We will have to request receipts. and this is another approach that has been used, is you have the business provide a certification or an I don't want to use the word affidavit because I don't know that that's where we're going to go, but in their application, they will be certifying that they had these expenses, and the expenses have to be incurred between March and the date of the application. And we will have to see that those expenses are eligible and that they had in fact paid those expenses during that time. So I'm thinking it's an affidavit, it's an application, there are receipts attached, and that will, and furthermore, and I didn't include it in my criteria, the business has to agree that they will be reopening if they are closed, and or if they're open, that they have, you know, been limited by indoor closures or capacity limitations.
And then the random selection piece that's borrowed from Yolo County. Is that's their approach as well?
Yes, many jurisdictions have done that where there is a limited amount of funds and lots of applications potentially. It seems the only fair way to do it without introducing a subjective review process. So you are correct. We intend to review the materials. I intend to have a committee of staff review the eligibility and the materials and application, and then we will literally randomly select. And as it is proposed right now, there would be two groups. There would be category 1 businesses and category 2. And then after the eligibility was determined, we would select randomly from those two. And then depending on if there were category 1 funds available, which I don't anticipate, but if there were, then we could reallocate additional funds to category 2.
And the childcare additions you're suggesting is a category 2. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, and I do that with some trepidation. I mean, it's so important, and I know, you know, it's the right thing to do. On the other hand, I got an update statistics today about how many child care facilities there are in West Sacramento, and there are 34 in-home daycares. So it's very important, and again, I think we want to err on the side of allowing businesses to apply and then knowing that they had a chance and that we went through this fair process to determine who the recipients would be.
All right, thanks, Mayor Pro Tem Sandine. So we've heard some ideas for potential changes, I think, this afternoon, although not much. I think the overall direction has been supportive of the program. The language in number 7 about eligibility and PPP, I think that's been clarified, and we'll want to clarify that, you know, to put an exclamation point behind that. That the simple receipt of a PPP loan is not disqualifying in this particular case. When we make the argument to our state and federal partners that they should send money locally, we almost always say it's because we understand our local business climate the best, and we know these businesses, and so please don't just send out money by formula, because especially with small amounts, if there are small businesses in our community which, as Councilmember Orozco noted, who put their life savings on the line and have a way forward. They have a way to make it. And all they need is some help with the tents and the barriers and the street closure and some other stuff. That has to be our priority. Even though it's easier to say, hey, you know what, let's just send everybody $700 or $750. Everybody should get $750. That's a simple approach for us, makes us feel good. But it doesn't actually change the business environment in the city, and we have to do both things. Obviously, we're not. There's a humility about our capacity to sort of figure out who's going to make it and who's not. So I'm not suggesting that we get in there heavy, but I think even to some extent, the $25,000 that is reserved in this program for helping businesses move outdoor. That's an example of, okay, if Results Gym has a plan and an idea, and they need $12,000 to do it. But doing so will save their business and will mean that they're open after the pandemic. Or the same thing, if that's true for Devil May Care ice cream, or for Kickin' Mule, whatever. If that's if we need $12,000 to rescue them at a moment where their creativity and their customers are like, yeah, I want to go, I totally want to do it, and it's $12,000. But instead, what we've done is spread a little money shallowly all over the city. I think we'll regret it, and because we will have lost businesses that we could have saved. And that's what I think obviously we're talking about that today. I know I've been struggling with this for, through this whole item, is thinking about, are we getting that balance right between making sure we have enough money in those cases where it is the health orders. It's not the general economy that we're trying to grapple with here. That's definitely the responsibility of the federal government and the state government. To the extent to which we are experiencing, a recession as a result of COVID, our little city cannot counteract a recession. But our little city does have one of our main responsibilities is public space, and the county has regulated the use of indoor activities. So where can we be helpful in ways that are specifically going to make it possible for those businesses that could do something outside and comply with those orders that have been negatively affected directly by the actions of, in this case, local government, even though it's not us, to restrict their economic activity. And so I hope that $25,000 is enough. And I want to give the city manager the ability that if in the first week or two, we get a lot of gyms and hairdressers and restaurants and others that are like, yeah, I can make it. I just need $6,000 for the tents and the other things, that we're open to that, and that we have not pre-decided that we're just going to spread the money broadly ahead of time. So that's the part I'm struggling with. And the comments about childcare are so on, right? That in both ways, in both the caution that Diane made and the absolute need, which is, okay, now if we add another 36 eligible applicants, then does that mean that another 36 aren't going to get money because it's a random selection? This is the problem with trying to spread $175,000 across every single small business in the city. So I'm hoping to spark a little bit more discussion before we close the item about how might we, if we can, how might we figure out where in those 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 7 moments with those individual companies, small businesses where we could make a difference, how could we make sure that we haven't closed that door to them by spreading the money around? And I see Mr. Ledesma, who is, as I said before, but it was one of the most knowledgeable experts on this nationally, has chimed in on his mic. So, Mr. Ledesma.
Yeah, and it's easy to say that when you're dealing with the federal government, which has an abundance of money and billions of dollars, and it gets that. But it does come down to that point. You make some really good points, and the need for us to just think over this one more time, right? Because we have one shot of this $175,000. We have been grappling with this, at least I have been, around what is our role in this, because we don't have a lot of money, and so it is a compelling point you're making that we have to be thinking about this in a way that gives us the most bang for the buck. And what is that? How do you quantify that bang? And I think that's what I'm grappling with the reality of, and the unfortunate reality of this pandemic and its effect on the economy is it's led to losses of revenue for business, and not all of them have been able, unfortunately, and it breaks my heart on every one of them. Not all of them are going to have the wherewithal to withstand it, and you want to help them, and you want to provide it. But I think about those who have, and I don't want to call out names, but I know a couple of businesses that have, as soon as this happened, went right to for restaurants, takeout model only, reduce staff. They tried to go the PPP route to save staff for the first 8-week period, and now the 24-week period, and all of that helps with it. 24 weeks is not very much, and now going inside a 9-month pandemic. And they are dipping into their savings and dipping into their investors or dipping into other sources to kind of help to do it. And I think of those businesses that retrenched right away, kept some employees on board through PPP, and maybe just need this last little bit of help to, have the tent outside or the heaters or the barriers, whatever it takes. And they'll be able to bring 2 more people back on. And so, and it's one of the ways that you measured, how they're dealing with PPP is, you had the certain employees at the beginning and you had to have certain employees at the end. And so I'd be interested in maybe looking at this as, how you measure criteria is those that that will allow them to sustain or grow their employees that as a result of at their time of application. If it brings out 1, 2 more people to employ because they get 200 more feet of retail space or sitting area, whatever it is, that might be part of their business plan of how they're going to go forward. So I think to your point, it's not just enough to say that they're going to use it and they're going to, it'll open them up, but you can, that might be one way to quantify that. And again, takes it a little bit out of the formulaic part, but we would know that if it's Devil May Care or Kick a Mule or Bike Dog or whatever, they'll know they know exactly the ones that are kind of thinking about this are already thinking about, well, if I just have that one more stretch of tent, I can go into the fall on the rainy days and even be able to sit another 10 tables. That equates to so much revenue, and I can bring back 2 people to support that. They're thinking that way. They just need the $10,000 to cover the cost of the capital injection of doing that. So, and maybe that's a way to get at it is because these are grants and we need some determinant to be able to say that's the kind of plan we need. There are going to be those who just, again, I need this $10,000 to keep 2 people on board, and we're not saying no to them. It's just around prioritization. Maybe that's what we're getting at, is being able to say those that are going to actually be able to expand and move their operation, those that are be able to kind of sustain themselves for 3 more months in the current conditions. Again, they should be able to articulate that to a degree, and as long as it's in the eligible uses, we should be able to help them. And I do want to go back to something you said also, because I had my comments and I didn't get to it, which was the money the city needs that they're asking for. We're asking for $25,000 to fight barriers or reserve $25,000. And I'd agree with you, America, because we have such a really, I love our city because there's different, for lack of a better word, districts of areas in our town, whether it's where Kicky Mule is and the whole Harbor Boulevard area where, it's just a different dynamic of how people could eat outside and the space you can use versus Southport versus the Washington neighborhood. There's just different dynamics of geography, right? With the streets and the parking lots and the areas you have to use. I want to make sure we have the right tools to help those businesses in as many areas as possible. They might need something different in one of those areas versus another. So I'd agree with you that making sure the city has the tools to support businesses in that space is important. So whether it's 25,000 or if they need more, we should be open to that.
All right, Mr. City Manager, can I invite you down that you've heard some of the discussion and some of the ideas and some of the attention for some additional ideas? Do you have any further recommendations? Or?
Well, I think the input we received from the whole council is certainly going to be helpful in kind of finalizing the guidelines. We may need to just have, in the final recommendation, get a little bit of delegated authority in terms of how to wordsmith some of the feedback we received tonight or this afternoon. I want to just go back, though, and just thank the subcommittee, yourself and Mayor Pro Tem Sandine, many of the elements that you see both in this item and the next item was very helpful to get the early feedback, both this being a priority, but also some of the finer points like having to set aside for the city to be able to enhance public right-of-ways for businesses that could use the outdoor space. And I want to be clear about that. When we say for that set aside, we were looking at public right-of-way adaption. So I feel like I have enough direction and flexibility over that piece of it. We do want to hone in on some of the finer points again on the grant program. First of all, I mean, I think it's clear that we're not exempting, I'm sorry, not excluding businesses that received a PPP loan, for example. But I think we can add to that. Also, I heard the theme of showing that the grants have are enabling businesses to actually expand their current limited operation because of either having limited occupancy indoors or having to be forced to be outside and not space to do it. So I think if the council's comfortable with that, we could add that as part of the criteria for eligibility, that we actually ask them to show us how this grant will enable them to expand what their current operation entails. So I think based on that and some of the other feedback, I'm sure Diane took a lot of notes. I think we got enough to be able to wordsmith, again, the guidelines to take in the feedback. But if I'm missing something big there, we appreciate hearing that. So also, I just want to point out too, I know Diane, she may want to chime in about the outreach plan. I think we heard the feedback that it's important to not just do outreach, but do it in a way that's multilingual and takes into account the wide array of businesses that we have in the community. So maybe she can touch on that, what the plan is for that.
Thank you, Mr. Laurel, and members of the council and the subcommittee. This has been very, very helpful to us. We don't have all the answers, but we know that collectively together we will have a more effective program, and we've heard you loud and clear about prioritization. We will get to work on identifying community groups and neighborhood groups that can help us with the multilingual outreach. We have some ideas. We do have some contacts in that area. We will have all the materials translated. We will have the web materials in multiple languages and the application materials as well. So that will definitely include outreach to our existing staff that have those language capabilities. So there's quite a bit more work that we will need to do. And I think then that we will potentially have to delay opening the program until maybe the last week of October. And that will also give us time to hear what the county's grant program has done. The county's agreed to have task force members have some visibility into the applicants from our jurisdiction, so that will help us.
Mr. Ledesma?
Yeah, thank you. And I'd add to the outreach is not just there are institutions in our communities, nonprofits and CDFIs, those, as you know, Diane, the SBDCs, all those, is making sure they're aware of the program as well. They're probably working with customers or with small business owners that just aren't kind of on our radar even. So it's important for you to reach out to those. I know we mentioned some maybe Hispanic chamber, but there's others as we've worked with before in our small business programs that are probably helping program customers or small business owners today.
All right, then we have before us the recommended action with at least a couple of clarifications, which are on the child care and its eligibility under the second group, under the terms that have already been described tonight, this afternoon during the meeting, and on with respect to the eligibility criteria number 7 in the form which dealt with not having received any state, city, county, or federal assistance, that doesn't include PPP. I would also point out it shouldn't include, if we're providing support to business, like heaters or tents, that should also not count in that same respect, right? And the timing of those might be different anyway. But I just want to be clear that when we're saying they're not receiving a grant or some support from the city, that's not including that fundamental program that we've described to you. right, so that's before us, Mr. Ledesma.
I will move the recommended action. Are we taking public comment on this? I'm sorry, before.
So we have received, we noted at the beginning that we have received public comment on that, and the website has been back up and operational for the last hour almost. So that's also available too.
Thank you.
I'll second the motion.
All right, so been moved by Councilmember Ledesma and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Cindy. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Of course. Councilmember Orozco.
Aye.
Councilmember Guerrero.
Aye.
Councilmember Ledesma.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Sandin.
Aye.
And Mayor Cabalden.
Aye, so that motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 3, which is consideration of ordinance 20-14, extending a temporary moratorium on evicting commercial tenants. Mr. Huerta.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Today, staff is presenting for your consideration ordinance 20-14, which terminates the existing ordinance 20-5 and extends eviction relief and foreclosure protections to some commercial tenants. Following the governor's executive order N-2820 issued on March 16th, the council approved ordinance 20-5, placing a local temporary eviction moratorium for both residential and commercial tenants. Tenant protections under 20-5, ordinance 20-5, were closely aligned with the governor's executive order, including the termination date, which was subsequently extended multiple times by the governor. On August 31st, as the council knows, the governor signed Assembly Bill 3088, which further provided eviction relief and foreclosure protections for residential tenants. Unfortunately, it did not include commercial tenants. But on September 23rd, the governor issued Executive Order N-8020, extending the local government's authority to impose limitations on commercial evictions through the end of March 2021. And this was originally also contained in Executive Order N-2820. Because AB 3088 only provided protections for residential tenants, staff in the city attorney's office prepared ordinance 20-14 to extend the eviction relief to certain commercial tenants who were financially impacted by the public order shutdowns or capacity limitations. Appendix A of the proposed ordinance contains a complete list of business types that would be protected by ordinance 20-14. But generally, these include businesses like daycare centers, eating and drinking establishments, personal services, and retail sales. Additionally, staff attempted to align Ordinance 20-14 with protections and requirements found in AB 3088 to try to keep some consistency and avoid confusion between commercial and residential tenants. For example, we included the requirement that eligible commercial tenants pay at least 25% of rent due to the landlord to continue to be protected, and to require that they deliver to the landlord a declaration of financial distress due to COVID-19. Lastly, the termination date of the ordinance was tied to the latter of the termination of the city's local emergency, or Yolo County having been listed at the Tier 4 level under the statewide metric for at least 3 consecutive weeks. We think this termination process for the proposed ordinance makes sense. However, given the governor's recent executive order, the termination date of the proposed ordinance could also be tied to the end date of that last executive order, which would be March 31st, 2021. If adopted, Ordinance 2014 will take effect this coming Thursday, October 1st, 2020. This concludes my brief presentation, but staff is available to answer any questions from the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Raul. Are there questions from members of the council? comments. Madam Clerk, do we have public comments on this item?
We did not receive any public comment, Mayor.
All right. Councilmember Guerrero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Raul, do you know of any commercial projects or businesses that have availed themselves of this particular ordinance? Is there, are we keeping track, or is anybody keeping track?
Yes, we are. We have received multiple requests for information from both residential and commercial tenants. We have been keeping track of those requests. I can tell you that when the original ordinance was passed, we did get quite a few requests for information. We provided the forms that the staff, with the help of the city attorney, drafted for their use. We haven't received as much requests for information lately, but we have received in the past from both commercial and residential tenants, and we have kept track of those. I believe that we reported some of that information in some of the initial reports that were being provided to the council as part of the COVID-19 reporting, but we do have some of that information of inquiries that we have received.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Ledesma.
Thank you. And I think that question was a little geared towards, I think, what I'm wanting to ask about, which is, I'm supportive of this, the ordinance and continuing it. But my question is other jurisdictions around us taking, are they taking the same similar action? Sac County, Sac City, other jurisdictions? I'm aware of Sacramento, city of Sacramento, having something similar. I'm not aware of any other counties or cities. Perhaps city attorney may have some additional information, but Sacramento has something very similar. Other than that, I'm not aware of any other ones. All right. I am supportive of it because, obviously we just had a commentary on just the ability of our small business owners and business owners that are leasing space. And certainly this does not relieve them of their rent, their lease payments or rent payments, which is an important, part of I think, an understanding at a policy level why we're looking at this is it is the ability of a business owner to retain the space. They don't, for a circumstance that is not of their own doing because of the health. The health officers kind of from limiting indoor space use and so on. This is necessary, and so I agree with the concept, and it's just the longer this goes on, this is going to be probably more feedback on the constraint it's having on that and the actual commercial landlords and owners who are trying to also maintain the value of their assets and their properties. And it's just something that we need to be conscious of as well. So, but I am supportive of this and appreciate you bringing it forward.
Yeah, I agree. I'm definitely supportive of moving this forward. We were one of the first and only jurisdictions to adopt protection for commercial tenants because of our interest in small business in our community, and we had to do it quickly, right? So as we paid attention since that time, things have changed, and we're learning more, and the future is still. There's things that we know about what's coming and things that we don't. I guess I think it is important for us as a small city. We're not a charter city to have some to be humble in how much we insert ourselves into the contractual relationships between private companies. So I'm not sure I favor the sort of open-ended date on this. Tier 4 is the lowest level under the governor's order. So, for example, Placer County, which has just voted to reopen everything, basically, they're not in that tier, but everything can open, right? So the rationale for by which we would have this ordinance and this limitation in effect wouldn't apply in that case. So I'm more inclined to link it to the governor's executive order, because in my view that's where we're getting the authority to do this to some extent, and so that is an appropriate kind of legal basis. Also, we hurried and we use the zoning designations to accomplish this, but this applies to retail businesses of up to 25,000 square feet. So let's think 2 Walgreens, right? That's a large retail business. We're not only talking about Whitey's here. Actually, Whitey's owns its own space, but we're not only talking about small businesses. And I really want to be careful about the city becoming enmeshed in commercial real estate transactions between a company on the size of a Walgreens or twice as big and their landlord, which might be a smaller company, right? So, it's the right ordinance. We needed to move quickly, and using our zoning rules as a shortcut made a lot of sense. But we should be careful about not making those quick decisions permanent without really thinking through what the consequences are. Because I think I know we all share the same objectives here, which is to try to make sure that all the things that we talked about in the last agenda item, as Mr. Ledesma said, that we protect and support those small businesses for whom they're doing the best that they can, and we just got to get them through the crisis. That is our fundamental purpose here, and we should, to the extent we can, be drawing up an ordinance that does exactly that, and not too much more than that in terms of weighing in battles between corporations, as an example, or that is based on a time limit that doesn't necessarily line up with what the direct impact of public health orders might be. Councilmember Guerrero.
Oh, sorry.
Any
Actually, I was gonna move it.
Okay. All right.
I'll second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion?
Just quick question, clarification. This is the comment is made about the time frame as now. Maybe you can clarify what that is, but it's the either of the two, whether we go into tier 4 or the emergency declaration right now. I to the governor's executive order, we need that included in the motion.
All right. Yeah, I guess I would propose doing that. Just adding that actually as a third criteria. That would also. I mean, they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, but if the governor terminates the executive order, which is the basis for a lot of the rest of it, both our authority, but also the limitations on companies to be able to do those, to be able to sell and do their business. That would be an appropriate addition. So it wouldn't replace the others, but it would be the others. And the other question I had about that, Mr. Laurel, is that it says the last to occur. And I'm not sure I understand why that would be the case.
That's the issue, yes.
So why would we be proposing to do that?
Well, I guess the logic would be that if you only took the 2 options in isolation, which as of, I think it was last week, the governor issued the executive order, was kind of with the paradigm we were working under. We didn't really foresee a scenario where the city's emergency declaration would be lifted prior to the statewide emergency situation ending. So I think the thought was to the later 2. I don't know if you want to expand on that, but that's my recollection of where we were. Jeff.
Yeah, I think that's essentially correct. There was some thought that we could find ourselves in a situation where you make a decision that you don't need the local declaration and would instead rely on the county's or the state declaration. But that there was some feeling that we wanted to have an additional criteria that had more to do with the opening, because your local emergency declaration wasn't specific to that. So that was sort of the thinking there, but it could be the first to occur of any one of those 3 things. At the first to occur of the expiration of the executive order, lifting the local emergency, getting to tier 4 for 3 weeks. That's totally up to the council. I just for the record, I am comfortable that you have independent authority to do this. You don't need the executive order, but the executive order is a logical link.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Jeff. I agree with you, and I didn't mean to suggest that we absolutely didn't have the legal authority, but we are adopting these as emergency ordinances, without the full process that we might have done otherwise. Commercial rent control and eviction policy is a fairly contentious issue everywhere, and we might have done more than what we have done on an emergency basis. So I just think if we're going to sort of do that and disconnect it from the emergency, then we ought to start fresh and adopt a policy on that basis. So thanks for the clarification.
I'm supportive of tying it to the governor's order. While I think you have the independent authority, I like having the governor's executive order. So.
All right. So if we were to make it the first of the two that are in the proposal or the governor's executive order, is there support for that, or Councilmember Guerrero? It's your motion.
Yes, I agree with that.
All right, Mr. Ledesma, is it a second?
Yes.
All right, so then we have an amended motion then. Is there further discussion or more issues? All right, then Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll on the amended item?
Mayor Pro Tem Sandin.
Aye.
Councilmember Ledesma.
Aye.
Councilmember Guerrero.
Aye.
Councilmember Orozco.
Aye.
And Mayor Cabalden.
Aye. All right, so that motion carries. Raul, thank you very much.
Yep.
Brings us then to the council calendar.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. No updates to the calendar today.
All right, thank you. City manager report.
No report. Thank you.
City attorney report.
No report. Thank you.
All right, staff direction from members of the council. And we have no future agenda item requests. So is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Orozco and seconded by Councilmember Ledesma that the meeting be adjourned. And there are much has happened since our last meeting, and a lot of tragedy in our community. I would like to just highlight one this evening and ask that as we adjourn, that we do so in honor of Fidel Martinez. Former member of this body, a former member, a mayor of the community as well, one of the founders of our city as we incorporated, and an important and key community leader in many ways, in and outside of city government. So would ask that we adjourn in his memory tonight. All right. So with that, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Guerrero.
Aye.
Councilmember Ledesma.
Aye.
Councilmember Orozco.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Sandin.
Aye.
Mayor Cabalden.
Aye. That motion carries and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. Stay safe.
Thank you.